Representative Nancy Mace, Republican from South Carolina. It's going to be hard to imagine that a lot of these cracks in the Republican caucus are going to get repaired. And it very well may be that some of the reforms, and look, I think it is a good thing to devolve power from the leadership to the members. And some of these holdouts are going to get committee chairs. But there are some that are going to get chewed up and they're going to get destroyed. And it's unclear yet who those are going to be. But you get the sense, I'm hearing from some of these Republicans in the caucus, that they're going to just wait. And when there's an opportunity for them to break those members who made them go through that, they're going to break them.
The Speaker has reportedly given the Freedom Caucus, that ultra-conservative faction, a third of the seats on the Powerful Rules Committee, which controls which bills make it to the floor. You've called Matt Gaetz, one of its members, a political D-lister and a fraud. You've sparred with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'll show our viewers part of that and let them interpret your meaning. How are you going to work with these folks to get anything done for the American people?
It's going to be very difficult. Matt Gaetz is a fraud. Every time he voted against Kevin McCarthy last week, he sent out a fundraising email. What you saw last week was a constitutional process diminished by those kinds of political actions. I don't support that kind of behavior. I am very concerned as someone who represents a lot of centrists, a lot of independents. I have as many independents and Democrats as I have Republicans in my district. I have to represent everybody. I am concerned that common sense legislation will not get through to get a vote on the floor. And for example, we have 12 bills that we're supposedly going to be voting on in our first week in office. 3 of them are abortion bills and pro-life bills. I am pro-life, but I have many exceptions, but they are not pieces of legislation that can pass the Senate and get onto the desk for the president to sign into law. And so if we're going to be serious about protecting life, for example, maybe we should look at more centrist views like ensuring every woman has access to birth control, because if you can reduce pregnancies, you can reduce the need or want for women to have abortions, for example, a very common sense, pragmatic point of view. But that's not what we're going to be voting on this week. Yeah. And I am concerned. I want to see pragmatics at work, common sense, fiscal conservative issues at work that represent all views.
I mean, she is I think an outlier on some level. But I think the point is that the caucus is going to line up and have the same, not necessarily the same politics as her. I mean, she sounds like, someone who is at least somewhat disciplined by the fact that not coming from an entirely Republican district. But there's going to be people who are going to be upset.
And it just seems like, especially if this is Nancy Mace is no real so-called moderate Democrat by any stretch of the imagination. And even she's basically kind of, I think, telegraphing here, I am going to be the one taking arrows for this stuff back home, and basically with no choice as to whether or not to vote for it, because as a staunch McCarthy ally also, I can't be in the position of both kind of mavericking some of these votes while also sort of not going along with him as well. This
is something you revisit now in 2 years, is basically what she's saying. This is going to make it almost impossible for someone like her, quite impossible, but to get reelected is what she's worried about. Because the entire project, which I think and on some level was already here's the surprise. They already have a problem with extremism. The reason why they picked up the House is because Democrats don't mobilize. The Democratic Party in New York State is garbage. There was no fear amongst Democrats in places like New York and California that there was going to be statutes, laws passed that will inhibit a woman's right to abortion in those states. And so they didn't feel like they needed to come out for these sort of more localized elections, or as they perceived it. And it ain't going to get better for them in 2024, both in terms of the motivation of Democrats to come out and vote, and in terms of their ability to sell themselves as not complete nut jobs. Because they're going to start voting on things, or they're going to have, they're going to basically be inhibited from passing any type of legislation. Not that it would have necessarily been signed or passed in the Senate, but they're just not going to be able to run on anything other than their sheer insanity.